It's my distinct honor on behalf of my little granddaughter to do an introduction to start this event here in the homeland of many of my friends and relatives. I just wanted to say it is indeed an honor to be here with you, and I just wanted to introduce my granddaughter. We call her Tiwanamat. She's the fourth Tiwanamat. I'm Tiwanamat. My mother is Tiwanamat, and my daughter, her mother, is Tiwanamat. That name comes to us from Nanaimo to show our relatives, and that's the way we always remember who we're related to, where we come from, and it gives us a grounding for our future to remember that we have a name and that we have to remember to honor that name and not do anything to tarnish it. So that's why it's very important that we try to share our names and talk a little bit about the history. But I don't want to delay too long. It's always hard to introduce my granddaughter. I'm very, very proud of her. And she is our sustainability. She is our real hope for the future. That she carries a lot of teachings with her and how she brings that dignity to these occasions. And we are indeed, she's a treasure. Like many of our old elders, she carries a lot of wisdom in her already, and she helps really inspire a lot of us. So with that, I would like to introduce Gracie Blackwood, my granddaughter, to do the opening prayer, and she's going to share a song with you. attention. We started with the prayer. It's a lot of gratitude for all the gifts that have been provided for us. And then the 13 moons, which is our calendar for the year, which is a lot based on the different salmon cycles of the year. So if some of you have some of this in Chawton, you heard the salmon names, and you heard Wakas, our messenger, the frog. You heard her say those different words, so just thought I'd give you a little bit of... Hi, Scott.
I have to set my timer because I've been put on a strict 10-minute diet. I should say the first thing that you do when you invite somebody from a First Nations community is not create a time limit. So I'm going to start now. Hait squachel halet siam nights chalicha. Sahanap tenetsne. Chisalea seneth husayanich. Lay it with othlip eight lungs. My name's Adam Olsen. I'm from the Saanich territory. I live and born and raised my entire life on Chotlip in Sartlip First Nation. It's an honor to be here with you all today. I'd like to thank our relatives from Songhees for their opening, and for Gracie. I'm thankful for Gracie. And I'm thankful for the work that's been done in order to restore the language of the Saanich people, Senchothan, as an important way for us to remember where we've come from and who we are as people. So much of who we are is locked up into the language that we spoke, into the worldview that language helped us to articulate. And so it's an incredible thing that my relatives in Saanich have been doing in order to bring that language back at Claywana School. And now we've got a bunch of our youth running around talking about us in Senchothan, and those of us who didn't benefit from that have to wonder what they're saying about us. Hopefully it's good things, Gracie. Consultation does not mean explaining. However fulsome, however respectfully the actions the government is going to take that may or may not ameliorate potential adverse effects. Such a means of dealing with admittedly difficult issues looks very like we know best and we have your best interest at heart. First Nations, based on past experience, quite rightly are distrustful and offended at such an approach. And this is a quote from the BC Supreme Court Justice M. Marvin Koenigsberg, who just recently in January found that the provincial government had not properly discharged its duty to consult with First Nations by simply signing an agreement with the federal government saying, you do it. The provincial government still has a responsibility and a duty to discharge on their own. And as the provincial government is responsible for the Local Government Act and for the legislation that guides municipal governments and regional districts, I think it's important to put that context around it. Consultation does not mean explaining. Even if you're really explaining hard, you go in with a great plan to explain, that's not consultation. And in fact, we found that a judge has set back certain processes, namely the Enbridge pipeline, because the provincial government does not discharge its duty to consult by simply signing an equivalency agreement with the federal government. I was elected to Central Saanich Council in 2008. I was the first on-reserve, status-carrying Indian elected to Central Saanich Council. We've been around for about 50 years. And I've lived my entire life on Sartlip, actually on the same property. Some may say that's not very progressive, but I love the place. We recently built a house there. My family, personally, never paid property taxes. We never paid for water or sewer delivery services. We never paid for trash removal. Those things, those ideas, those notions were completely foreign to us. And I had got elected to Central Saanich Council. Some, and particularly one colleague of mine, pointed out how my inexperience was probably going to drag the entire rest of the council down. But yet I brought other skills to the table. skills that that particular member of council still has yet to understand. But nonetheless, I had an ability to create and to utilize that bridge. I'm a mixed-blooded person. I have lived. Stelly's Crossroad has this broken yellow line down so that you can pass, even though it probably you shouldn't be able to pass on it, Mayor Windsor. But nonetheless, there's this broken line that goes down the center of Stelly's, and that really is the place that I've been, a very dangerous place with traffic zooming by on both sides. And that was what I brought to the table, this understanding, this deep understanding of the very difficult relationships that we have. They're in my DNA. The world that I was raised in was an anathema to the world that I was elected to. And it was pointed out to me on several occasions. But in a district like Central Saanich, with 2 First Nations within the boundaries of the municipality, can vote in municipal elections, and with servicing agreements, thankfully now modernized and probably needing to be revisited again, I would say that in Central Saanich, having somebody with this kind of different perspective was important. In the early days, I reached out to the CRD to say, hey, I'd like to share my perspective. I'd like to share the understanding that I have about these unique relationships that we have in the CRD. This is the first opportunity that I've had to share that, and that was 7 years ago. But this is not a point to draw out the CRD or the municipalities and say, bad. This is a celebration for me that I'm standing here today. This is the celebration of the work that's been done over the past 7 years to establish within the government bureaucracy and within the political directors that are elected to the board an understanding that these relationships are critically important. And where we are today, sitting here in this beautiful building, is an example of how over time we as directors and we as politicians and we as municipal councillors and mayors can affect positive change. The work that Chair Desjardins has done, and Marianne, and as well Rick, perhaps, and Mayor Windsor. They pointed you out early. It was good, yeah. Has been good work, and it's an amazing start. It's important that we sit down with each other and listen. The work that you've done to invest in your staff, the work that Sue and Eric have done, is really good work. But it's been successful because of the way that they do the work. Because they're respectful, they're compassionate. And because I think, and I'll speak only for myself, but I think in a broad sense, First Nations trust them. Trust that they're doing the work in a good way and with the right motivations at heart. And so thank you, Sue, for the work that you're doing. Thank you, Eric, wherever he is at, for the work that you do. It's important that we understand that living in the capital region, we're living in one of the most complex areas in the country in terms of relationships. We have the Douglas Treaty, a pre-Confederation treaty, as my relatives pointed out, that the Saanich people have. We have modern-day treaty processes in the final stages. Most of the territory here is unceded. Makes a very uncomfortable situation for the federal, provincial, local, regional, and First Nations governance. How do we move forward together? Most recently, and actually going on throughout time, we've had increasing clarity from courts telling us about this relationship. The biggest case recently, which everyone will know about, is just Silcotin. A massive case that everybody should turn their attention to. The 2006 Morris Olsen case, my dad's case, that went to the Supreme Court of Canada and won on a split decision. And the Saanich Bay Marina case, which my relatives from Sayout know well, and we in Saanich know well, further defining the fishing rights of the First Nations on the Saanich Peninsula and of the Douglas Treaty. Traversing those layers of complexity will be a reflection of the investment that you're making as directors and that your mayors and councils are making in your staff so that they can do the work. Your success is based on how you invest in this department, in that department. It's the effort that our local leaders make, how you weigh the facts in front of you. the decisions that you make. We've all seen the reports that highlight the environmental, social, and fiscal responsibility that we have when we weigh our decisions. But I'd like to add some context around that. How about considering them in the past, present, and future context as well? Where have we come from? Right? How is it that we got to where we are today? It's very instructive. And there's no point in putting on your rose-colored glasses to look at our history, our collective history. Look at our collective history with the most honest lenses that you own. There's no harm in doing that. What about the present? I need to change my page. What are we doing now? Are we effective? Has it been informed by past experience? Is our organization flexible? Are we a good neighbor despite how we perceive how good our neighbors are? And what is the impact about the decisions that you're about to make? Not just in terms of this most recent term of office, which will end sometime in November of 2018, but for future generations, for Gracie, for Gracie's children, because they inherit your decisions. As I said at the UBCM last September, the most important relationships that local governments have is with their First Nation neighbors. But we need to change the course of those relationships in many ways. Central Saanich is an example of that. There's been historical and current situations that go on in Central Saanich that definitely better relationships would benefit them. We're not going to change our collective future. We're not going to have a better collective future if we continue to do things the way that we've been doing things in the past. And it's about process for me. It's about changing our process. We had a discussion out in front, and there's a few things that we could talk about. Grace Islet as an example, where the CRD has some skin in that game that just ended, with servicing. We could talk about the regional sustainability strategy, and those are CRD initiatives. We could also talk at a federal level about the National Marine Conservation Area as an example as well. These are all processes that I think that are letting us down collectively to a certain extent. It was 7 years ago that I was sitting in a tri-municipal council meeting with my colleagues from Sydney and North Saanich, and Parks Canada came in and had a conversation with us about the National Marine Conservation Area, an incredibly important initiative to protect the southern strait of Georgia, the Salish Sea, to provide conservation values injected into the decision making. I'm at 11 minutes?
Yep.
You didn't even put your hand. You were going to come put your hand. Okay, I'll shut her down here. What I'll say to these decisions is that make sure that the First Nations people the First Nations communities that are next to you are the first people that you talk to, not the last people that you talk to. What if this amazing initiative that I think everybody wants is shut down because of complex legal matters that simply cannot be negotiated at the end of a process? It would be a shame. So why not understand those at the beginning of the process? Why not sit down and share a meal and to get a full understanding of the context with which the initiative that you think is a great idea and is likely a great idea can move forward in a good way and can move forward and have success at the end of it. So have those discussions with your First Nations neighbors at the outset. Could you imagine how powerful it would be if Chair Desjardins or the Minister of Parks could stand up with the chiefs flanking them saying, we've had this conversation, we are in agreement that we're moving forward together. The way it is now, the way the process is now, it sets First Nations people up to be the scapegoat. And perhaps if a First Nation stands up in front of the Parks Canada National Marine Conservation Area and says, you know what, you're infringing on our rights and our title in our area and you didn't have that discussion with us at the front end, now what happens is that awful vitriolic, the comments in the media about how the Indians stopped another good initiative. Do the SWOT analysis at the beginning. Understand the strengths, understand the weaknesses, understand the opportunities, and understand the threats. That way you can find a way through them. You can have that discussion over a longer period of time. It's unfair to corner First Nations who have got significant constitutional, treaty, and Indigenous rights. It's unfair to put them in a position where they then have to carry the weight of the final decision. So I just want to finish, about 3.5 minutes over time, thanking you for inviting me here to be able to say a few words, the words that I'd been hoping to say for a while. This to me makes me feel very good. That DNA that I have in me feels much better today than it has felt for the past 7 years that I've been in politics. So I raise my hands to the chair, to the staff, to the leader of the initiative, to senior staff of the CRD. You're getting this right, but don't expect it to be over anytime soon. We're going to live alongside one another forever. It's an ongoing relationship that needs to be maintained. Just like my relationship with my son, I'll be deking out early so that I go to his baseball game. It's important that we're constantly maintaining those relationships and strengthening those relationships with those closest around us. Thank you very much for inviting me. Heichka.
Can you also introduce yourself?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have one more bit of business. It's my honor to, I guess they thought I would probably be the only person that might be able to partly enunciate a First Nations name. So that's the reason why I'm doing it. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Robina Thomas from right here at the University of Victoria. Her traditional name is Quiltsiamat, and she will be taking us through the rest of this morning's work.